Hi guys. Today let's take a look at evaluating perfectly competitive markets within the market structure theory of the firm work that we've been doing. So as you may recognize, this is the lecture that we've used for perfectly competitive markets. But now let's evaluate the efficiency, particularly of this marketplace. Hi, President Obama. What we ought to know before we begin, and the stuff that we've been practicing in class for a while now, is the nature of perfectly competitive markets in both the short run and the long run. In the long run, please understand that perfectly competitive markets can only make normal profit. You should feel comfortable finding economic profit or loss in a perfectly competitive market based on the profit maximizing or loss minimization level, where MC equals MR. And you should feel very comfortable describing and writing out why perfectly competitive markets cannot make economic profit in the long run. So, if we are to evaluate market structures, we often look to see whether those market structures are efficient. Productive efficiency refers to the resources of that firm are being used in the least costly manner or most effective manner, meaning those resources are being used in a most allocatively efficient level. That happens for a productively efficient firm at the lowest point of the average total cost curve. Allocative efficiency occurs when supply and demand are equal, as we saw in microeconomics, but when the output of the equilibrium level of supply and demand are the same as the maximization level, profit maximization level for perfectly competitive markets, we should see allocative efficiency too. So let's take a look at a graph. Here is a perfectly competitive market in the long run, and the profit maximization level would be where MC equals MR. In this case, don't forget that MR, marginal revenue, is also equal to the price in a perfectly competitive market. So though it's labeled as P2, that is the same thing as the marginal revenue. The marginal revenue, or P2 curve, intersects the marginal cost curve there at quantity level 2. Quantity level 2 is also where the average total cost is the lowest, which shows us that it's productively efficient. That's where the firm spends the least amount of money to make its product. But this firm is also allocatively efficient at the same exact point, because that is also where the marginal cost or supply curve would intersect P2, which is also the demand curve. Do not forget that in a perfectly competitive market, the price is the same curve as the demand curve, as the same thing as the marginal revenue and the average revenue, simply because perfectly competitive markets are price takers, not price setters. So if we examine in the short run, perfectly competitive markets are actually not allocatively or productively efficient as they are in the long run. So allocatively efficient is indicated with the yellowish circle as shown at point D, as in dog, on the top graph, or point A on the bottom graph. Allocative efficiency is where the demand curve equals the marginal cost, or the supply curve. In this case, it is allocatively efficient in that this is where supply equals demand, and since the demand curve is the same thing as marginal revenue, we see both curves are allocated, or both graphs are allocatively efficient. So perfectly competitive markets in the short run will be allocatively efficient always, yes. But productively efficient, will this be where they can produce at the lowest possible cost? You can see on both the top and bottom graph, this is where the red dot would appear. And on the top graph, no, if you're producing at the profit maximization level, you do not achieve productive efficiency there, or in the bottom graph either. So just to go back and review, productive and allocative efficiency do occur in the long run, but not in the short run. So to evaluate the perfectly competitive market, in the long run, they are productively and allocatively efficient, but not in the short run. And as we examine further the other market structures, you will see that this is definitely different as we look at monopolies, oligopolies, and monopolistic competition. Thanks.